"Get up, old man, what could a taser trigger in just 6 minutes? This ain't a motel." That's what the guard said right before he pulled the trigger on a taser and sent 78-year-old Harold Grayson collapsing onto the bench, gasping for air. To them, he was just another vagrant, but 6 minutes later, 3 unmarked SUVs tore across Elmsworth Plaza, and the man they just tossed was saluted by a 4-star general, because Harold wasn't just tired, he was the reason half a platoon ever made it home. Welcome to Graceful Valor Stories, where tales of compassion and kindness are told. Let's uncover what really happened. The wind tugged at the American flag outside Elmsworth City Hall, snapping it sharply against the pole. It was one of those raw March afternoons where the chill came not from the temperature, but from the emptiness in the air. People passed through the plaza like clockwork, city workers in pressed shirts, young mothers pushing strollers, a man on a Bluetooth headset pacing near the fountain, and near the base of that fluttering flag on a worn wooden bench just a few feet from the building's stone steps sat Harold Grayson. He wasn't there to make a scene, he wasn't there to cause trouble, he was there because he was tired. Harold was 78 years old, his back ached from the 3-hour bus ride that brought him in from the outskirts of Stunton, his feet were swollen from walking too long on a pair of shoes he couldn't quite afford to replace, his shoulders sagged, not from weakness, but from the kind of weight you carry when you've lived too long with names you no longer speak out loud. He wore an old field jacket, olive green, frayed at the sleeves, a simple rucksack rested at his feet. The canvas was patched in 3 places, the zipper caught halfway and inside it packed neatly a Bible, a pair of thick socks, a peanut butter sandwich and a coin. The appointment with the VA office upstairs wasn't for another 45 minutes, so Harold sat quietly, legs stretched out in front of him, palms resting on his knees, eyes closed, not in sleep, but in stillness, the kind soldiers learn in cold foxholes. When silence means survival, to most people walking past, he looked like a nobody. To 2 men walking out of the front entrance, he looked like a problem. Ryan Bishop, 28, wore his security uniform like a costume, shirt tucked too tight, aviator sunglasses. Even though the sun was behind clouds, he had a badge, a belt, and just enough authority to make it dangerous. Behind him was Cody, 2 years younger, 1 rank lower, and twice as unsure of himself. "Hey," Ryan muttered, nudging Cody as they stepped onto the concrete landing. "You see that?" Cody followed his line of sight. The old man on the bench, eyes closed, unmoving. "Looks like he's sleeping," Cody said. Ryan scoffed. "This ain't a motel." He took a few steps forward, boots clapping on the pavement. His voice rose, not loud enough to attract attention, but sharp enough to cut through the quiet. "Hey, wake up, old man, no loitering." Harold stirred slightly, one eye opened, then the other. He blinked, confused, as if the world had shifted under his feet while he was still catching his breath. "Just resting," he said, voice hoarse. "I have a VA appointment at." Ryan didn't wait. He reached for the taser on his belt. Click. The sound was mechanical, hollow, unforgiving. Cody hesitated. Ryan, maybe we just ask him to move." But it was too late. The metal prong struck Harold's side. The jolt hit him like lightning. His body arched, shook violently, then crumpled forward onto the bench. His rucksack fell to the ground. His fingers clawed at the wood as he gasped for air, the pain spreading like fire through every nerve in his chest. People turned, some froze, others pulled out their phones, but nobody moved. Ryan holstered the taser with a flick. "I said, move, didn't I?" Harold wheezed, trying to sit upright, his face pale, his breathing shallow. His hands shook, not from fear, but from memory, because this wasn't the first time he'd been hit, but it was the first time it had come from his own country. Across the courtyard, sitting on a low stone bench beside the Veterans Memorial, Mr. Samuel Ellison lowered his newspaper. He was 73, a retired high school history teacher. His knees didn't bend the way they used to, but his mind, still sharp, he had been watching the old man since he sat down, had noticed the careful way he folded his jacket, the way he scanned the perimeter instinctively, like someone who still expected enemy contact even in peace. And now he had seen a man shocked like a threat, for the crime of sitting too long. What secret could this coin reveal? Ellison stood slowly. He made his way toward the commotion. Just as Harold struggled to reach for the fallen rucksack, his hand trembled as he zipped it open, fingers digging until they found what he needed, a coin roughly 2 inches wide, bronze-etched with an intricate insignia. He held it out. "Please, just give me a minute," Harold rasped. "I'm not drunk, not a vagrant. I served this. This was given to me after caught soccer." Ryan squinted. "Caught what?" Harold swallowed hard. "General Armitage, Task Force Omega." Ellison froze in place. His pulse kicked. He knew that name, not from lectures, not from textbooks, but from the pages of declassified documents he had pored over in his post-retirement years, from whispered citations and footnotes, from the symbol now gleaming faintly in Harold's trembling hand, a downward sword wrapped in an omega. Ellison had read about that coin in a Pentagon case study. No one outside of that unit was supposed to have one, which meant this wasn't just a homeless man, this was a man history had forgotten, and the guards had just tossed him. Ellison stepped back, pulling out his phone with shaking hands. He scrolled to the contact, David Wexler, a former student, now Working at the Department of Defense Intelligence Division, he hit call. As the line rang, Ellison looked up and whispered under his breath, steady as he could, "Don't move, Sergeant, we're about to fix this." The coin glinted in the light, worn bronze, but unmistakable. Ryan held it between two fingers like a cheap souvenir. "What even is this?" he scoffed. "Bottle opener, carnival token." Cody leaned over his shoulder, squinting at the engraving. "Looks like something you get for running a tough," he muttered. He joked. Harold sat slumped on the bench, one hand clutching his ribs, the other reaching out slow and trembling. "That coin was given to me," he rasped, "by General Armitage for what we did at Kalat Soccer." Ryan snorted. "Sure it was, Grandpa. And I'm guessing the president gave you a parade after, right?" A small crowd had begun to form, just a few at first. A woman with a stroller pausing on the sidewalk, a man in a utility vest, coffee cup in hand, a couple of City Hall employees lingering near the doors. Phones were out recording. Something about the way the old man looked, broken, breathless, but somehow still holding himself with dignity, made it impossible to walk away. Harold didn't respond to the taunts, he just kept his hand extended, his voice thin. "Please don't lose that." But Ryan wasn't listening. "You know what this really is?" he said, turning to Cody. "It's a con. I've seen this act a dozen times. Old guy, ragged clothes, made up war stories, pulls at the heartstrings, so someone will buy him a sandwich." Cody looked uncertain now. "I mean, maybe we just give it back." Ryan rolled his eyes and held the coin up higher, letting it catch the sun. "This," he said, "this is just a prop 20 yards away." Mr. Ellison gripped his phone tighter. A voice had picked up. "Wexler." The man answered on the other end. Ellison's words were low. "Urgent, David, it's Ellison. I need you to listen carefully." A pause. "Then I'm at Elmsworth City Hall. An elderly man was just assaulted by private security. He's holding a challenge coin, soared through an Omega wreath border." He mentioned General Armitage, Kalat Soccer. The silence that followed was different. Ellison could feel it shift through the phone. Wexler spoke again, but this time his voice had dropped an octave. "Did you say Kalat Soccer?" "Yes. Can you confirm the coin?" "I saw it up close." Another pause. "Do not engage," Wexler said. "Give me 5 minutes, stay with him." And then the call ended. Back in the plaza, Harold's hand had fallen to his lap, his head was bowed slightly, but his posture hadn't collapsed, not completely. Somehow, even in pain, even with the eyes of a dozen strangers on him, he still sat like a soldier. Ryan, bored now, moved to toss the coin in the trash bin nearby. That's when the sound came, not a siren, not footsteps, but engines, low, powerful, purposeful, the kind of sound that makes people turn their heads before they even understand why. Could this be the moment justice arrives? From the far end of Main Street, 3 identical black SUVs turned the corner in formation, windows dark, lights hidden in the grille, flashing red and blue. But silently, they weren't marked police, they weren't marked at all. But the way they moved, the way traffic parted without odd question, the way people instinctively stepped aside, everyone knew this. Was it routine? This was something else. The vehicles accelerated down the Plaza Service Road, curved around the main fountain, and pulled to a sharp stop just feet from the bench where Harold sat. Tires crunched on the pavement, doors opened in sync. Out stepped 6 men, not officers, not local deputies, suits, dark, fitted, eyes scanning, and from the rear SUV, a man emerged last, broad shoulders, steel gray hair, for silver stars on each collar of his tailored coat. General Robert Wallace. The plaza fell utterly silent. Ryan stepped back a little, instinctively, straightening his posture. Cody froze beside him, color draining from his face. General Wallace didn't speak. He didn't need to. He walked with a precision that silenced doubt, every step controlled, calculated, heavy with purpose. He didn't look at the crowd, didn't look at the security guards. He looked at one thing, only the man on the bench. Harold Grayson hadn't moved since the SUVs arrived, but his breathing slowed, his hands steadied. Wallace stopped just in front of him, close enough to see the scuff marks on the boots, the frayed edge of the jacket, the fading scars across Harold's temple. He turned at last to Ryan, his voice sharp, clipped. "You there," he said, "that coin in your hand, give it to me." Ryan hesitated. "Sir, this man was..." Wallace didn't repeat himself. Ryan's fingers fumbled. He handed the coin over. The general examined it in silence, turned it once in his palm, then again, then finally he looked back at Harold. His voice, softer now, carried just one question. "Sergeant Major Harold Grayson." The old man lifted his head slowly, deliberately, and nodded. One time that was enough. Wallace took one step back and raised his hand in a sharp, perfect salute. The entire courtyard held its breath. The wind shifted, a single leaf scraped across the stone plaza. Someone coughed, soft, reflexive. But no one else moved, no one dared. General Wallace lowered his salute with precision, then he turned slowly to face the gathering crowd. His eyes swept the onlookers. Some held phones frozen mid-recording, others simply stood there, hats in hand, brows furrowed, unsure if they were witnessing history or a reckoning. He raised the coin above his shoulder, letting the afternoon light catch its bronze edge. "This," he said, voice calm, but cutting clear through the silence, "is not a trinket, not a toy, not a collector's item." He turned to Ryan and Cody now, who both looked like they wanted to melt into the pavement. "This Is a presidential unit citation for Task Force Omega, awarded only once to a group of men whose names aren't printed in textbooks, who were never interviewed on television, whose service records are still mostly blacked out. He stepped closer to Harold again, his voice shifting lower. More Reverend Sergeant Major Harold Grayson didn't just earn this coin, he bled for it, for us. Then he turned back to the crowd and his voice rose, not loud but powerful, commanding. 28 years ago in the Kringle Valley, our unit was surrounded, cut off, outnumbered, communications gone, ammunition running low. I was a young captain, my men were panicking, we were preparing to die. He looked down at Harold, who now sat a little straighter. This man, Wallace said, his jaw tight, took command. He rallied us, reinforced our perimeter, and when the time came, he led the breakout, carried 2 wounded soldiers on his back for over 6 miles through enemy lines. One of them was me. A sharp inhale echoed from someone in the crowd. Wallace paused, then faced Ryan directly. And you just tossed him? Ryan swallowed. Cody looked like he might throw up. Wallace took a slow breath, then turned toward the city hall steps as more staff spilled out, confused, whispering among themselves, "Where is the head of this building's private security?" He called, firm but controlled. A balding man in a cheap gray suit pushed his way forward, clearly flustered. "Right here, sir. I just arrived." Wallace didn't wait for excuses. "Your company will be contacted by the Department of Defense by end of day. Your contract will be reviewed, impending investigation likely terminated." He turned back to Ryan and Cody. "Your names now, your full ID numbers on record." Ryan stammered, "Sir, we didn't know." "No." Wallace cut him off. "You didn't ask." The general stepped close, so close now the younger man couldn't avoid the weight in his eyes. "You had a man sitting quietly, not resisting, not threatening. You had every opportunity to speak first, but you chose power over patience, force over respect. If Sergeant Major Grayson weren't a man of restraint," he paused, "you would already be in handcuffs, charged with assaulting a federally protected war hero under Title 18. That landed like a thunderclap." Gasps, shuffling feet. A woman covered her mouth. Wallace straightened. "But he's chosen dignity, forgiveness, and for that you should be on your knees." Silence, long, thick, suffocating, and then a single clap. It came from the far edge of the plaza. A man in jeans and a work jacket, standing with arms folded. Another followed, then another, and suddenly, the square filled with applause. Not loud, not wild, but deep, rhythmic, respectful. Harold blinked, stunned, his fingers tightened around the edge of the bench. He hadn't asked for this, he hadn't planned on being seen, but now they were all looking, not in pity, not in suspicion, but in reverence. Wallace waited for the applause to quiet before speaking again. Then, gently, he turned to Harold. He knelt, not in deference, but in steadiness, and picked up the old rucksack lying on the ground, the zipper still half open, a corner of the Bible sticking out, the sandwich untouched. He stood, brushing dust from the canvas. "Sergeant Major," he said quietly, "we've been looking for you for weeks. No one had a current address. You dropped off the grid. VA couldn't find your updated file." Harold didn't speak, but his gaze had cleared. Wallace smiled faintly. "The reunion's tomorrow, just outside DC. Task Force Omega. The boys are gathering." He paused, his voice softer now. "They've been asking for you for a moment." Harold looked down like the wind had been knocked from his chest. Then, slowly, he nodded. Wallace offered his arm. Harold hesitated, then took it, and as the 2 men turned toward the waiting SUVs, the crowd parted without a word. A path opened, quiet, wide, unforced. Phones were still filming, but no one was talking now. They were just witnessing. As the door of the middle SUV swung open, Wallace turned slightly, just once, to the plaza. He looked at Ryan and Cody, at the security chief, at the crowd, then back at the man beside him. "No more hiding," he said. "Let's take you home." The door to the SUV closed with a gentle click. Inside, the air was quiet, cool, still. Harold sat back against the leather seat, his hands folded in his lap, the rucksack beside him. Across from him, General Wallace adjusted the buttons on his coat, then glanced over, softening when he met Harold's eyes. "You all right?" he asked. Harold nodded, but his voice was faint. "Didn't expect all that." Wallace smiled slightly. "Neither did Elmsworth, I imagine." The convoy pulled away from City Hall and merged onto the highway. The town faded behind them, the commotion, the cameras, the confrontation, all left behind in that plaza where one old man had simply closed his eyes to rest. Now he was headed towards something else. Something waiting. The military guest house was nestled in the woods just outside Quantico. Not a hospital, not a facility, just a quiet, secure place for men who had earned peace the hard way. They gave Harold his own room, soft bed, warm shower, fresh clothes folded neatly on the nightstand. For the first time in months, he slept through the night without waking from the cold or from dreams that never quite faded. The next morning, Wallace was waiting for him at the dining hall. He stood when Harold entered, motioned him to the corner table away from the bustle. "There's something I didn't get to tell you yesterday," the general said. "There's going to be a formal commendation ceremony next month. The Department of Defense is reopening certain records, public recognition posthumous for some, of course, but for you, full honors." Harold's brow furrowed. "I didn't come for medals." Wallace nodded. "I know, that's why it matters." He paused, Then added, "Today's not the official event, today is just a reunion." The hall was quiet when they arrived, an old gymnasium repurposed into something sacred. Rows of folding chairs, a long table at the front with simple refreshments, no banners, no press, just men with silver hair and canes, men with prosthetic legs and stiff salutes, men who had once stormed through mud and fire and silence together, now filing in one by one, glancing around the room like searching for ghosts. And then they saw him. Harold had barely taken 2 steps inside when the first voice cracked through the stillness. "No way!" A man in a brown leather jacket stepped forward. Disbelief written all over his face. "Grayson." Harold froze. The man limped closer, his eyes glassy. "I thought you were gone, man," they said. "You didn't make it." Others turned, stood, crossed the room slowly. Voices rose in murmurs, then names, then embraces. It was messy, raw, beautiful, and for the first time in decades, Harold Grayson didn't feel like a shadow. He felt seen. 3 days later, the people of Elmsworth gathered again, this time not for headlines, this time by choice. City officials had quietly arranged a new ceremony, a humble one, no grand speeches, no red carpet, just neighbors, veterans, school kids, and townsfolk who had watched the footage, read the headlines, and looked around their quiet community with new eyes. They came to the plaza, to the same bench beneath the flagpole, only now that bench wasn't wood, it had been replaced solid bronze. Mounted into stone, on its backrest in crisp engraving, "Reserved in honor of our veterans, we see you, we thank you." At the base of the pole, beneath the shadow of the flag, sat a small plaque bearing Harold's name. He stood off to the side as it was unveiled, hat in hand. He hadn't wanted this part, but Wallace had said gently, "It's not for you, Harold, it's for the ones who still sit quietly in parks, for the ones we still walk past." A little girl from the elementary school stepped forward with a bouquet of sunflowers. She didn't say anything, just handed it to him, then saluted the way she'd practiced. Harold looked at her, eyes soft, and returned the salute. That night, as the sun dipped behind the rooftops of Elmsworth, the plaza slowly emptied. People filtered back to their lives. The flag rustled in the evening wind, casting long shadows across the bronze bench, and in that fading light, the coin was returned to his palm, cleaned, restored, and now etched on the edge with 3 simple words: "We remember now." Harold stood for a long moment, then sat, same posture, same silence, but this time, not alone. There are stories that make headlines, and then there are stories that settle quietly in a nation's bones. This wasn't about medals or speeches, it was about a man who asked for nothing but a place to sit, a man who carried 30 years of service in a canvas rucksack and a scar across his back, a man who never asked for applause, but finally got a salute, because sometimes dignity isn't declared, it's witnessed, it's passed from one hand to another, like a coin too heavy to fake, and sometimes all it takes is one person who chooses to see, and an entire country will no longer look away. In our darkest moments, kindness still finds a way, often in the quietest places. Not everyone who helps wants recognition, some just need to know that today someone isn't going hungry, and sometimes that alone is enough to change a life. You may forget the story, but if no one retells it, history stays silent forever. Subscribe to Graceful Valor Stories, where justice is honored, kindness is remembered, and no act of quiet heroism is ever lost.